Welcome everyone to the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. This is Jessica from Cure SMA's Family Support Department, and we thank you all so much for joining us today for the Changing Your Relationship to Your Thoughts with Mindfulness session. We are so grateful to our national presenting sponsors, Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis Gene Therapies for their incredible support of this year's Virtual SMA Conference. Please note that all lines are muted during the webinar other than for the speakers. And then you can also find there's a chat conversation tab located on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can ask questions throughout the session. And then at the end, we will answer as many of these questions as we can during the Q&A portion. So now we are excited to welcome our speaker today, Tara Davenport. Tara, welcome.
Thank you. Could we start sharing slides, please? So I'm going to start us off today with a couple of slides that my guess is you can relate to. So on this first one, we have Marge from the TV show The Simpsons, and on this it says, me. I'm not going to think about it anymore today. And then also me the rest of the day, where she's clearly sitting and ruminating about whatever she wasn't going to be thinking about anymore. Is this familiar? I especially like her glass of wine there too, since alcohol really helps with the not ruminating, doesn't it? Next slide, please. Then this one also, if you've read about mindfulness, you hear things like, just let your thoughts float by like boats on a river, which sounds so amazing and beautiful and peaceful, unless your boats on a river look like this picture. I'd love to let them float by, but nothing is moving right now. Next slide, please. So my guess is that these are relatable to many of you. I know they are to me, which is why I'm thrilled to be here today to share some ideas with you. So my name is Tara Davenport, and I'm coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I became part of the SMA community after my almost 10-year-old daughter, Claire, was diagnosed with SMA. Next slide, please. Here's a picture of my kids, which I share in part because they are amazing, but also because pictures don't always tell the full story. Although they are amazing, in addition to Claire with SMA, 2 of them have a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So do you remember that picture of the boats clogging the river? I can totally relate to that. But I've also worked really hard over the years to find some peace and balance with that logjam of thoughts in my mind, and that's where I want to start today. So with that, we can stop sharing the slides. Okay, so today we are coming together to talk about our thoughts. I had someone ask me once, who spends time thinking about their thinking? And I will say that for years, I never thought about my thinking. I didn't challenge my thoughts or ever wonder if they were true. They just dictated how I went about my day each and every day. So today I'm going to share with you 2 mindfulness practices that have really been game changers for me in how I can relate to my thoughts and how I gained a little bit of control over them. Okay, so let's chat about our thoughts. My mind has a tendency to go into what I lovingly call a cascade of crazy. So one little thought can spark the next, and then the next, and then the next. And suddenly I'm driving my car down the road, having a massive fight in my mind with, I don't know, say the insurance company, mostly unaware of the last 10 minutes that I spent driving. Or I could be happily folding my laundry and I can feel a tickle in my throat. And pretty soon, I have myself like planning a caregiving schedule for my kids, because certainly this must be COVID. Just in 30 seconds, I can go from folding the laundry to this huge stress response. Can some of you maybe relate to that? In mindfulness, we call this tendency to jump around from thought to thought rather quickly our monkey mind. And in science, we call it defaulting. It's when we aren't very mentally engaged in a task and our mind just wanders. And for purposes of creativity and problem solving, this default mode or monkey mind, it can be amazing. I mean, so many great ideas arise when we're just daydreaming. But what we know about our brain is that it is beautifully designed for our survival, but not so much for our happiness. The number one job of our brain is to keep us alive. So when we aren't mentally busy with something, our monkey minds, or that default brain, it's just scanning for potential problems that need to be fixed to help ensure our survival. On the surface, it doesn't really sound like a problem. I mean, it actually could sound helpful. You scan for problems, you solve them, the human race survives, everyone's happy. One of the challenges, though, is that our brains, that just lump of gray matter in your skull, our brains can't really distinguish between a real threat, like if a tiger is actually chasing you, and the idea of a threat, like when you're thinking about a tiger chasing you. All your brain knows in its dark, damp home is that it's getting signals that indicate danger, danger. And basically our thoughts can trigger these danger signals to our brains, even when we're safely tucked into bed at night in our safe, cozy homes. You can think about it this way. Your brain can't distinguish between if you are actually being yelled at by your boss or if you are just thinking about being yelled at by your boss. So it's going to get you ready for a confrontation either way. Your brain's going to go ahead and just release all those hormones and chemicals into your body that you need to be ready for a fight, because it doesn't know, is this real or is this a dress rehearsal that you're just playing out in your mind? So I want to share this idea in a slightly different way. It's called the hand model of the brain. Since we're here to talk about mindfulness and not neuroscience, I'm going to keep it super simple, but it's a good illustration. You can Google hand model of the brain if you want to dig deeper. So let's let my hand and my wrist represent a brain. The eyeballs would be right here, looking out. My wrist is the brain stem, where the signals from the body get sent to the brain. This bottom part of our representation of the brain, it represents our primitive brain. It's the part we sometimes call our lizard brain. So think for a minute about a lizard in a garden. He has that flat, sloping back head. He doesn't have this front part that we have. It's a really flat head. And he's always on guard. He's always watching for the hawk or the cat that might jump out and grab him. And all that little guy, he doesn't have a mortgage or doctor's appointments to worry about, but he still lives in this perpetual state of stress. This is why it's hard to catch a lizard. In humans, this part of our brain is responsible for our ability to fight or to run in an emergency. You've maybe heard this called the fight, flight, or freeze response. So if you're out in nature, walking along, rolling along, and you think you see a snake out of the corner of your eye, it's this lower brain that processes that information immediately and sends your whole body into the fight or flight or freeze stress response. Thankfully, as humans, we also have this top part of our heads, represented by this top part of my hand, which represents our more advanced brain. It's where we can rationalize things and think logically. Maybe you can think of it as like the CEO of your brain. When you have to stop and think, wait, what was I doing? Oh, that's right, I was trying to find my glasses. You're using this part of your brain. Or when you're trying to find the right word, or if you're problem solving, it's the part that can take over after we startle because we think we see the snake and help us realize, oh, it's just a stick, we're okay. So when the brain gets danger signals from the body, this lower primitive brain, it gets stimulated and activated. And if it's a big enough stimulation, this lower primitive part of our brain can quit communicating with our upper rational brain, and we can flip our lid. Our rational brain goes offline, and our primitive brain takes over. Have you ever seen yourself flip your lid before? It is an interesting moment. Some time ago, I sent my kids and our dogs out the front door of our house. And as I stepped out behind them, I glanced to the side and there was a rattlesnake coiled right there on our front porch. I went to say I shepherded everyone to safety, but in reality, I just stood there yelling at the top of my lungs, move, move, move. No one had a clue what I was talking about. So they all just stood there looking at me like I was crazy. Luckily, some other adults had cooler heads and it all ended okay, except for my dignity. And honestly, at first, I was really embarrassed by what seemed like an overreaction. I mean, I literally couldn't form functional words. Now that I know and understand this teaching, I know that biologically, this is just what happens. We are designed to do this. Boom, my lid flipped. The rational, reasonable thinking goes to the sidelines. This higher level of brain functioning is overridden. You don't use your language well or make good decisions. So in many circumstances, obviously, this is hugely helpful. And the fact that it can happen automatically is actually what helps to keep us alive. It's what lets us lift a burning car off of a baby or try to outrun a tiger, but it's not always accurate. We can activate this stress response just by what we are thinking. We can trigger it by thinking about having to give a presentation, like say to the Cure SMA community, or thinking about the next medical emergency or problem that might come up, or thinking about what might happen if our caregiver doesn't show up. But when we don't need to fight or to run to save our lives, this cocktail of stress hormones that our brain sends into our bodies to be ready to fight feels really awful. It's basically what many of us would describe anxiety to feel like. It's the racing heart, the shallow breathing, tense muscles, restlessness. And besides just feeling icky, it's also not healthy. Our bodies are designed to handle this response in an acute situation, but living in a chronic state with these stress hormones surging through our bodies, it sets us up for heart disease, GI problems, and a host of other ailments. Okay, so here we are, we're driving, we're folding our laundry, we're lying in bed at 2 a.m., and we've triggered our brains with our thoughts. And we're experiencing the side effects of this stress response in our bodies about something that is not actually happening right now. Whatever we might be thinking about happened in the past, or it might possibly happen in the future. But in this moment, it's not happening. So what can we do? I have a little mindfulness hack for you that has really helped me. So first, let me define mindfulness for you. The definition of mindfulness is 2 words, intentional awareness. Being intentionally aware of or choosing to pay complete attention to what is happening right now. If we think of our attention like a spotlight, it's choosing where we're going to focus that spotlight of our attention. We can choose to put the spotlight on what we see. We could choose to put that spotlight of our attention on what we hear. Or we could even choose to notice any sensations that we can feel in our body. So let's think, if you were trying to get away from a tiger that was chasing you, what would you definitely not be doing? You would not use your mind to focus on sensations in your body. If you're preparing to fight to save your life, you will not stop and put your awareness on the feeling of your chest as it rises and then drops as you breathe, right? You wouldn't start suddenly feeling into your body to see if maybe you're hungry, or maybe you're tired, or if you could feel your fuzzy socks on your toes. No, you're not going to do any of those things. In an emergency, when our lizard brain is running the show, we are not connected to any feelings or sensations in our bodies. It's what helps us live through these super stressful moments. So this is the hack. We can speak the language of our brain by sending it signals that show it in this moment, everything is okay. If everything wasn't okay, I wouldn't be tuning in to the sensations in my feet. And what this action of dropping into the sensations in our body does is it helps us more quickly connect this or reconnect this advanced logical brain to our primitive brain so that they can work together again. So this is one way that we can change our relationship with our thoughts. We start to realize we have just a bit of control over the thoughts. Not necessarily being like Marge Simpson from our opening slides and saying, I'm not going to think about that again today, but just letting our brain know that in this moment, I am fine, I am safe. So let's try this idea of dropping into the sensations in our body together. I can tell you that trying to do this practice only when your lid is flipped won't likely be very helpful. We have to practice during times of low stress, and then we're more able to draw on this skill when things get tough. So let's give it a try. This exercise will take less than 5 minutes. So if you're comfortable, I want to invite you to close your eyes and just take a few breaths. And as you're breathing, beginning to notice where in your body you can most vividly feel your breath. We all usually have one place where we can notice the sensations of our breath the most vividly. Maybe it's in the rise and fall of your chest. Maybe it's at your nose or at the back of your throat. Maybe it's in your belly. Just feeling into this sensation of where you can feel your breath. And sometimes when we're new to this experience of just being aware of our breathing, our mind can question if we're doing it right. So simply ask yourself, how do I breathe in my daily life? And just breathe like that. We're not trying to change the way we breathe. We're not trying to take deep breaths. We're simply feeling what breathing feels like right here, right now. Now moving that spotlight of our awareness from the feeling of our breath, we can notice other places in our body where we feel sensations in this moment. Can you feel the weight of your body in the chair or wherever you're sitting or lying right now? Tuning into the places where your body makes contact with whatever is supporting you. By feeling that, you are sending the message to your brain that right now you are safe. Right now, there is no tiger coming at you. What about your feet? Can you feel your feet right now? Maybe you can feel warmth or tingling. Maybe the sensation of your fuzzy socks. We can also find it helpful when trying to let our brain know that we're safe to feel into the more visceral feelings in our body, the visceral sensations. So maybe asking yourself, do I feel hungry? Do I feel tired? Do I have a pain in my right knee? Just trying to be fully present, having your full awareness on only what is happening right here, right now. In this time and place where you are safe. And when you're ready, just opening your eyes. So this idea of taking back some of the power of our thoughts, simply by feeling into sensations that are currently happening in our bodies, is one way that we can change our relationship to our thoughts. The other idea I wanted to share with you today might seem a little crazy at first, unless you have spent some time thinking about thinking. So I want you to ask yourself, do you ever question if a thought is true? Many of us spend our entire lives assuming that just because we think a thought, that it's true. Thoughts magically appear in our mind, and we move right into belief of them without really questioning. But in reality, our thoughts are not always true. Really, you do not have to believe your thoughts. We have thousands of thoughts in a day. And I don't know about you, but that means that I have probably had, I don't know, maybe 10 trillion thoughts in my life that have turned out to be absolutely not true. What makes a thought feel real is the attention that we bring to it. We can make a thought feel like reality by focusing on it and relating to it as if it was actually happening in the world somewhere right now. I know a big one for me is having arguments with people in my mind, anticipating what the other person might say and preparing my answer and my rebuttal. And if left uninterrupted and unchallenged, these thought arguments begin to seem like real live events. It can even trigger that lid flipping that we talked about. So let's see if we can just start playing around with this idea that rather than jumping on board with our thoughts, believing them to be true, and then adding to them, what if at times we could simply choose to notice a thought and instead say, oh, that's just a thought. It's a practice called mental noting. It's mentally noting or labeling our thoughts as just a thought. No more, no less, not something we have to believe, and not something we shouldn't believe, just a thought. So if you find yourself thinking, oh, I'm so stupid because of what I said in that meeting today, you can note that, oh, it's just a thought. Or, oh, I'm so busy, I'm just never going to catch up. It's just a thought. Noticing them as just a thought, it sort of detangles or unravels them a bit, rather than being a true statement that we have to examine or either prove or deny it. Noting them as just a thought can lessen the power that they have over us. And you may notice, what you may notice, is that when you don't jump onto the thoughts and carry on down the path with them, they have a tendency to move pretty quickly on their own. Like maybe, I don't know, a boat floating down a river. You don't have to resist them or fight them or feed into them. You can note them as just a thought. So shortly after my daughter Claire was born, the doctors discovered that the vertebrae in her neck, her cervical spine, were deformed. And we knew from when she was just a few months into her sweet little life that this was a big problem, and it was going to require surgical fixing with a fusion of some type. We also knew that we needed to wait as long as we could before we did the surgery, as it was a risky surgery on a young child, especially one with SMA. So she spent her first 5 years wearing a sweet little C-collar neck brace to keep her neck stable. And it was during this time that I stumbled upon mindfulness and meditation. So my practice was very new. I hadn't learned yet, or at least I hadn't really grasped this concept of not needing to believe my thoughts and not needing to feed them once a thought popped into my head. Instead, I believed all the thoughts and worries that I had about her surgery were possible outcomes, and I allowed them to just run rampant in my mind. Or I would sit and meditate in my new meditation practice and try so hard not to have thoughts, which is impossible. And so I would still end up feeling stressed because I failed at not having thoughts. So I was literally held hostage by my mind by just these thoughts about her surgery, which ended up as a success when she was 5, and none of what my mind dreamed up or what I worried about came to be. They were just thoughts. So now, when my thoughts start to run amok in a way that isn't bringing me benefit in that moment, like, oh gosh, now it's her scoliosis getting worse, and how are we going to, and I can practice this mental noting. And instead of running down the road with that, I can think, oh, it's just a thought. And if that moment happens to be a good time to dig further into that thought, sure, I can carry on with it. But I can do it from a place of choosing to explore the thought further, not necessarily believing it to be true and something that needs to be addressed. Does that make sense? It gives me the power to choose rather than be automatically swept away with it. So do the thoughts keep coming? Yes, of course they do. I like to say our mind secretes thoughts, just like our stomach secretes enzymes. But as you pay attention to the thoughts, you'll notice that they're like a wave. They come and they go. And by allowing them to come and go without jumping on or riding them further down the thought process, we can change how we relate to them. So now when I have a thought like, oh, the teacher must think I'm a bad mom because I forgot again to plug in the Chromebook last night for the kids. Wait, it's just a thought. And I can move on. Rather than maybe thinking about all the ways I am a good mom or other proof that, oh, I really am a bad mom, depending on how I'm feeling in the moment. No, it's just a thought. Let it rise, let it fall. And like the practice we learned earlier, this is a skill that takes practice. We can't only try to do it when things are hard. And a good way to practice and get good at this mental noting is while we're meditating. And meditating is simply that 5-minute practice that we did earlier. It's simply sitting for a period of time, practicing our mindfulness or our intentional awareness, intentionally choosing where we are going to put the focus of our attention for a period of time. You'll recall earlier we practiced putting our awareness on sensations in our body. When we practice this mental noting, we choose for a period of time to put our focus on our thoughts. So as we sit, we just try to pay attention to the thoughts as they arise. Just noting them, being aware of them. And then rather than continuing with the thought, we choose to note, just a thought. And then we may think something like, well, this feels rather strange and silly. No, that's just a thought too. And maybe we think, I don't like doing this. Just a thought. Put thought in here. just a thought. By doing this intentionally for a period of time, then when I'm in my normal busy life, I have some practice with this. It's just a thought. And it's easier to catch myself earlier when I'm going into my cascade of crazy instead of when I'm already there. So before we wrap up today, let's do another short practice trying out this mental noting meditation and just playing with it. Today might be the first time you've really thought about your thinking, and this might be hard. So I'd invite you to just see what happens and be curious. So again, like before, settling into a comfortable position, whatever that means for you and your body. Maybe taking a few breaths, just being present for the sensations of the entire in-breath and the entire out-breath. Focusing again on those areas in your body where you most naturally feel your breath. And as we sit here, choosing to be present in this moment, we notice that thoughts immediately arise. Maybe it's resistance to sitting here doing this practice. Just a thought. Maybe it's thinking about what you need to do later today. Just a thought. You may find putting a one-word label on the thought is helpful. So maybe as you become aware of your thought, you label it planning. Maybe it's worry. Maybe it's rehashing. Judgment. Maybe it's just a thought. We are not finding the perfect label. We're just mentally noting the thought. And as we're noting and acknowledging a thought, we may choose to return to the sensations of our breath. In meditation, our breath is always our anchor because it's always with us. Anywhere we are. And then you note the next thought that appears, just a thought. Similar to our breath, our thoughts are like waves. They come and they go. We can't stop them. But we can be aware of them. We can choose if we are going to believe them. We can choose to simply note them and let them float by like boats on a river. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. So 3 little words, just a thought. They can bring about a profound shift in how you relate to your thoughts. So as we wrap up our time together, I hope these 2 practices, dropping into the sensations in our bodies to reassure our brains that we are safe, and mentally noting our thoughts as just a thought, I hope they both feel like areas you can explore and begin to play around with. Every human on the planet wants more peace and more happiness. And by changing how we relate to our thoughts, we can definitely take a step in that direction. So if we could start sharing the slides again, please. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I've put my email on this final slide, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments or issues that might arise for you that you'd like to discuss as you put these ideas into practice. I also put the icon for the Insight Timer, which is an app that you can find on your smartphone. You can even find it through your internet browser. An Insight Timer has a nice meditation timer that you can set up to make gongs and different sounds to bring you back if your mind has wandered too much. If you want to do a silent meditation, or it has hundreds of pre-recorded meditations on a variety of topics. So I hope that brought you some benefit today. I so appreciate the time that you spent with me here today. And with that, I will hand it back over to the Cure SMA team with any questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, Tara. That was such a great presentation, and there was a lot of helpful resources and tools to use for our own mindfulness. So we appreciate you sharing with us all today. Thank you. We did have some questions that came in for you and wanted to kind of move into the Q&A portion of the session quickly. So Tara, our first question for you is, if I've already, quote, flipped my lid, can these practices still help, or do I have to notice it before then?
So if you're in like full lid flippage, as we like to call it, like when I had the rattlesnake situation, you definitely can't expect that dropping into the sensations in your body is just going to immediately take you back to baseline. Your body released just a host of hormones so that you can run and get away and be safe. And those have to get through you. But what I have found is with practice, I can begin to notice when I'm about to flip my lid over things that I don't necessarily need to be flipping my lid about. And that's where I have found that this practice really comes in handy. It's starting to realize, wait, here I go again, and then be able to rein it in and drop back into those sensations in my body. Thank you for that question.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to answer that. It looks like our second question we have here is, I can see how noting just a thought could be helpful, but I can also see how my mind would keep going back to that same thought again and again. What do I do then?
It's a really good question. This practice is not intended to be a way to allow ourselves to skirt big issues or try not to have thoughts or to squash them. It is a relational aspect of how we relate to our thoughts. It's trying not to let the ones that are unimportant come up and take us over, or the ones that we don't want to address in this moment. If a thought continues to arise again and again, for me, I would take that as a sign it's probably something that I need to spend some time with and maybe schedule some time to make sure that I sit down and really give it my full attention and not be trying to think about it while I'm doing a bunch of other things.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it looks like we have time for just probably one more question here. So our last question is, do I have time to have a sit-down meditation practice for these to help me?
I would say that both of these practices are very helpful, but they do require some level of practice. Trying to do them only when we're in highly stressful situations or when the thoughts are coming fast, you probably won't find a great deal of success. Does this mean you have to sit on a cushion and meditate for an hour a day, trying to note your thoughts for an hour, drop into your body? No, not at all. But finding a few quiet times throughout your day or a little bit of a longer period where you can sit and play with these ideas and these concepts will then probably make them more available to you when you need them the most.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tara, for taking the time to answer all of these questions. If you do have additional questions, you can always use that chat feature throughout the conference platform on the session page. And we appreciate everyone who joined in today. There is a survey linked in the session page, and then you'll also be receiving a follow-up email with that survey link too, and we welcome any feedback that you have to share. And once again, we are incredibly thankful for the support from our sponsors for making the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference possible. Don't forget to join us this evening as we close out the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference with the conference community closing social at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And be sure to wear your conference t-shirt or if you have any other SMA swag or gear. So we look forward to seeing you all tonight. And if there's anything that we can do for you or if you have any additional questions, you can always reach us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference.